Welcome, welcome, welcome to today's episode of Everyday Enchantment. I am your host, Stacey and I am so excited because I have got one of the most amazing creatures on the planet here as a guest to chat with us about simplicity and I was going to say an education. Well, there you go, because we are both former educators. Well, actually, you're current and former educator, Sara Torpey. And so, again, I have a feeling education will make its way somewhere into this conversation about how we make enchantment simple. And
Mm.
so I'm going to give you a little taste. And then, Sara, if I miss anything and you want to fill in any blanks. But Sara is a business coach, a teacher, an author. You're just the most extraordinary mind and being where again, my mind gets so complicated, can get so much in my head. And then I read something you wrote, or I look at something you're sharing. I read something in your book, and all of a sudden it gets stripped down into this just beautifully profound simplicity that just makes the way clear for the next step and the step after that. So I know you work with educators, teachers, entrepreneurs, because again, we are the people that are
We
making
are
it complicated.
we are the people who need us.
Exactly. And so how do you take big complex things like running a business, running a classroom, and you use this energy of simplicity to make it to me part of what all of what you're about too is like making it fun and easy. Why are we getting up in the morning being, entrepreneurs and like slogging through? Like to me, that's why I always turn to you because when I do, it's like, oh, I can let go of the slog and find the fun again in it. So that's my introduction of you. Where have I missed a spot?
Oh my god, no, it might be the nicest one ever. I'm just gonna take you with me everywhere I go and let you do that job.
Fabulous.
That's amazing. I think and that's right. Like I've coached teachers and humans and all kinds of people and kids and adults and whatever. And I have always said since my classroom days, like my job on the planet is to be useful.
Mm,
And that's not complicated. Like you can be useful to people in whatever way utility strikes, right? Like that's my job. My job is to show up and be useful. And what it turns out I'm really good at is taking the tangled ball of yarn that is our brains and pulling out all the knots.
I
Like
love it.
very gently, like just teasing them out like you would out of a necklace and un complicating the puzzle and then like rewinding the ball and being like, okay, now it's just a ball of string. How about it? Let's go do the thing.
I love this. And it's interesting to me because I think some people who would be listening right now might wonder how we're going to make the leap from being useful and you like utility and this big ball of mental knots we all get ourselves in and the space where we can find what I would call to me enchantment is delight, that kind of
Yeah.
magical feeling when things are clicking. I don't know how you define it, but that's kind of kind of where I come, how I come at it
Yep.
from my perspective.
Well,
And
it's
so,
funny.
yeah, go ahead.
You asked me last week how I defined it, and I am a math teacher through and through. So the first thing I did was look it up in the dictionary
Love it.
because like what's fascinating to me is you were like, "Oh, I've never done that." And I was like, What do you mean? That's the first step in any what does this word mean?
The former English teacher in me didn't even
Yeah.
go to the
And so
dictionary.
like, I go to my friends who are former colleagues of mine at Merriam-Webster and I was like, "Well, let me look it up." And so it was so funny to me that my first step was like, well, I got to go get my dictionary. Hang on. Let me make it real simple and not try to make up a definition. Let me go find out what the definition is and decide what my version of that is.
Hmm. I love that you did that. And funny enough, like sometimes I think if I look at a definition, it overcomplicates it for me. So it's just like,
Mm,
let me make it up. I go the other side of that coin or that spectrum. And go, well, if I just make it up, then there you go.
right?
These definition. And so, tell me, how, like, because we did talk last week about this Merriam-Webster definition, which is, I think it was like to move or attract deeply.
To
Does that
attract
sound?
and move deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like particularly like to attract is one thing, but I think I really like the move deeply part.
Mhm.
And I think when we manage to untangle things and simplify them, the work of moving people deeply is easier. Like,
Absolutely.
right? The enchantment comes from, like, nobody is enchanted by a 46-step process. Like, that is some horrible baloney. And so, like, when the process is 2 steps and it is beautiful and simple, it's like the meals at the restaurant, right? Where, like, the meals where you're like, this had like 633 ingredients and took you 4 years to make, and now I'm going to eat it in 10 seconds. Like, I'm not enchanted. I am fascinated by your commitment, but also, like, what is wrong with you? Where, like, you get a meal someplace and you know exactly what's in it and you know it was like dead simple, and also that you couldn't have done it yourself because you can't allow anything to be that simple, right? When you cook things, I'm always like, oh, I could do that, but I don't think I could do that. And so it's magical to get things like that, right? That simplicity is magic. And we are moved so much more deeply by those plain, simple truths, right? Those simple ideas, the strategies, the things on Facebook that you read one sentence and you're like, oh, damn, why'd she have to say it like that? Instead of like the 450 words, right? And it's
Absolutely.
not that those longer things don't move people, but it's not the same kind of joy, right? Where you catch upon this like magical simple thing where you're like, oh, that's how I feel about this. I have instant hot water in my kitchen, and it's literally like my favorite thing in my house because like it is this magical little like $200 add-on that we when we redid the kitchen a bunch of years ago that makes me happy 4 times a day.
Yeah. Oh, that kinda sounds like I was gonna ask you this question about what brings you enchantment daily, but maybe you've already answered it for me, so I will come
Ah,
up with another question at some point, uh,
maybe.
during our
That's so
chat.
funny.
What I hear you, and it's kind of funny with the faucet metaphor that we're just bringing in here, is when you're in flow, like this also sounds like when we're in flow.
Mm.
So when you're in front of a classroom, you're a teacher, and you just have a moment, or you're with a client or a customer, you're writing something, and you have that moment, right? Where again, it kind of everything else gets stripped away, and you're really in the essence of your purpose, I love how you just strip that down to like, I want to be useful, right? This one energy of that. And then you get to use that as a guide everywhere you're making decisions and choices rather than overthinking everything and going, should I be doing this? Should I not? How should I do this? And I think that again, it goes back to like when we are in this flow,
Mm.
which is not complicated. I think it's like when we can step out of that energy, then that simplicity almost becomes, again, I love these kind of ideas of gatekeepers, but this gatekeeper to our magic. People can see it easier, like people that we want to, build in our communities and our audiences, and it becomes so attractive. It's like this energy that just is so contagious. It draws people in, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. It just is charismatic, just generally speaking.
Well, and I think it's sort of what it makes me think about is like, yeah, I'll talk to people sometimes and I'll say, what's your goal right now? And they'll list me like 8. And
Mhm.
you're like, well, is it hard for you to decide what to do when? And they're like, yeah. Like,
Mhm.
right, because you know what? You really only have one goal at a time. It's like it works so much more effectively
Mm.
to keep it really simple and be like, the overarching thing right now is this thing.
Mhm.
Because then it helps you, like you said, to decide, make decisions, to choose wisely in a way that feels like you're in flow, to keep the flow moving, to keep it uninterrupted. When you're trying to manage 8 flows,
Mhm.
no wonder it feels kooky.
Yeah.
Like, because you got water pouring in from every direction, and you're like, holy God, where is it all coming from? And you don't have enough fingers to spike all the holes, and like, it's bad. And so, like, that doesn't, nothing about that feels enchanting to me.
No.
But like, the stripped back really, like, this is my goal. Does this fit with my goal? Yes or no? If it doesn't fit with my goal, cool, I don't do it right now. It doesn't mean forever, it just means right now. I get to go do the thing I know is going to forward what I'm doing. I
Mhm.
get to do the thing, and that could be like resting. Like, it could
Absolutely.
be yesterday. Like, it was funny, I made my to-do list yesterday. My kids were home. It was a holiday. We had just gotten back from vacation. There's construction in my house. I was like, "Oh my God." And the first thing I put on my list yesterday was my workout. And I was
Mhm.
like, "Well, does that come first?" And I was like, "Well, actually, yeah, it does." Because that's the flow. Like, that's the priority order. That's the enchanting thing. That's the simplest thing, is to go like, "Yeah, no, this matters first."
What I hear you saying too, and tell me what you think about this, is there's a practic I know that so often we think of, like, again, enchantment or magic when we start talking about themes like that. Oh, it's kind of out there in this ethereal world. What I hear is like a recipe for simplicity that's linked to practicality that
Mm.
then creates magical synchronicities. And I think that for most of us, we can compartmentalize, oh, I'm doing something magical or what have you, and then I'm doing something practical. I don't know that this is what I feel when I listen to your work and I read and I engage with what you're sharing. Very much is there's a practicality to it that I think a lot of us don't realize you can blend those things together, and that is actually like a path in of itself rather than these two divergent things. If we're trying to do one, oh, I'm being practical or what have you. No, they're all blended together. I don't know what you
Well,
think about that, but
and
that's what I
I
hear when I hear you.
yeah, I agree fully with that. I think what's funny though, like, I don't this might be my overly practical self weighing in, but aren't the most magical things sometimes the things that are like exactly what you needed when you needed it? And
That
isn't that just the definition of practicality in some ways?
yeah,
Like, it is what I needed when I needed it, even though I didn't know I needed it.
yeah.
Like, and that is magic. It's like when you meet that person in the grocery store and you're like, holy crap, I needed her. Or like somebody gives you something and you're like, how did you know I needed? Like, it's just that like magical. But I think if we are tuned into the simplicity and we are tuned into the like, does this actually help me versus like
Mhm,
theoretically help me?
mhm.
I think there is much more room for magic, right? We create space for that kind of feeling and experience. It's like you can't appreciate a sunset you don't stand still long enough to look at,
That's so true.
right? Like, if you don't
That's
have
so
the space to stand still,
mhm.
how do you appreciate it? How is it magical if you can't pause? And so I think the simple and the practical let us create space to actually notice the magic.
Ooh, I love all these themes weaving together. So if I am somebody listening right now and I think there's might be somebody out there listening who has like 18 things on there.
For
I
real,
know
for
you
real.
mentioned 8, but this is just me being, hey, I'm being honest. I just was writing some things down and it definitely had more than one thing before I got on this podcast with you. What where do people start? Where does somebody who has a lot of knots in their ball of yarn, what's the first thread or what's the first place where you would support somebody in pulling something out and getting started?
I think in that vein, I think for me, for most of the people I work with, for most of my friends, for most of the people, like, because it's certainly like I'm still me when I have friends and the rest of it. Like, as you know well, like, this is who this is. Like, no matter where you tune in, this girl is pretty much the same. Um, I think it is about the like, okay, you have 18 things.
Mhm.
Where is the natural hierarchy here? Because
Mm.
there is, right? It's
Mhm.
like, there are things often, So I have like a mathy pattern brain in a lot of ways. But I think what we don't notice is sometimes we lay out our goals as if they are all on parallel, they're all equivalently powerful. And what we don't notice is like goal A actually happens because we do B. Like
Mm.
there's this natural hierarchy of those kinds of things. Like this goal actually sits above all the others, right? And for most people, and I have worked with lots of people in this kind of thing, even kids and teens and college kids, the vast majority of the time, there is one thing that
Mm.
sort of sits at the top of the pyramid that everything kind of reports into, right? That if you do these things, it gets you to this destination.
Mhm.
And it is like, okay, well, which thing is the destination? Like
Mm.
it's like a map almost. Like if you think about, I had a fight with Google Maps Sunday, like a knockdown, drag out battle.
I'm curious
And
who won.
I did, dang it.
Of course,
But
of
of course,
course.
it spent 2 hours telling me I was doing it wrong, which just made me freaking angry and rerouting me and being like, this way is slower. Like, no, it's not actually. It's really not slower than driving I-95 through Philly on a Sunday night of a holiday. It's
Oh,
just not.
I think it should be more intuitive than that, but that's another
Oh,
podcast for another time.
right. But it is like, it's like you saying to me, well, I want to drive on these 18 roads,
Mhm. That's a really good
but I'm
analogy.
trying to get to the grocery store. Like
Ah,
from my house, I could get to the grocery store 18 ways, but ultimately I'm gonna end up at the grocery store. So like which
absolutely.
one is the point on the map that you're trying to get to?
Hmm.
Because really that's what you prioritize off of,
Mhm.
right? That's the that's the pinpoint. It's like which one is that? Because there is one.
So
Everybody's got one, maybe even two, but
so I have a
usually one.
question for you about this. Do you think it's always the same?
What do you mean?
So, for example, if we were talking about, okay, you show up on the planet, and like you said, no matter whether you're doing it with a client or you're in just personal relationship, this usefulness, right? This the way you look at the world. Does that take like I'm thinking of an umbrella now almost like does that cover everything? Like is this useful? Is this connecting me to showing up in some way, bringing that practicality, or is that just a given? And then there's other things under. I'm just curious whether or
Um,
not purpose is the thing that then drives the other 18, or there is one of the 18 that just takes more precedence that helps everything else fall into place.
it's funny, I don't think of it like that. It's less so if we stick with the map analogy,
Mhm,
like the ultimate goal, the destination is the grocery store or whatever the point on the map is, right?
mhm,
The 18 other goals you think you have are all the routes you want to take, but the car you drive is
mm,
the way you go about it,
okay.
right? For me, usefulness is my vehicle of choice.
Ah,
Is the car I get into and it like feels good and the
mhm,
sound system's right and the seats are heated and the sunroof is open and the weather is good. Like it
mm,
is and it drives a little faster than it's supposed to. Um but it's like it's less because I think people have a hard time. We're taught to be so very checklist oriented.
mhm,
So to have people
mhm.
filter against like is this useful, is this not?
Yeah.
Can be really hard. It feels very subjective. And
Mm,
for so many people, even though that is my purpose for sure,
yeah.
but to be able to give myself something a little more, it's like when you teach, here comes the education part. Like when you teach kids things in school like multiplication, you
Mhm.
don't start with like, hey kids, what's 2 times 3? You start with like, okay, there are 3 kids and they have 2 each.
Yeah.
And you think about something concrete they know and you work your way out to abstract.
Yeah.
I think you and I have practiced this so
Mhm,
we can hold this filter of utility or of enchantment
mhm.
in our like in the front of our brains. But if it's not something you've practiced, you start with something more concrete and you use it as a filter on the concrete, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like, am I always going to the grocery store, right? Like, am I always going to Enchantment? I don't know. I don't know if
Mm,
it's I might, and again, we might just have different ways of breaking
yeah.
around the same piece, but I do agree with you that we all have energetic signatures or signatures, right? Which are tied to purpose and tied to how we show up and all of those things. And they're unique to us because nobody has lived our exact life circumstances in the exact way we have, even if there are similarities with other people
Mm.
on the planet. Nobody else is Sarah. You are it, and we have you, and we are so, gosh, the world is so lucky how we got this lucky. It's just like we won the life lottery today. And so to me, yeah, I'm just thinking like if I'm overwhelmed and I've overcomplicated things and I'm
Mm.
trying to find my way back, maybe I'm trying to find my way back to enchantment. Maybe I don't even know if that's right. Like I'm just drowning and I don't even, enchantment isn't even something on the radar yet, but I just know I'm drowning in my to dos or just all these, to your point, what, and this gets me, and I think it gets a lot of people. Years ago, I did some research. I was doing time management presentation or training. I think they said back then, and this is at least 10 years ago, 1,800 messages people got incoming. I'm sure that number has like gazillion quadrupled. And so how do people find, to your point, when there's all of this information coming at them, how do they pull out the thread? How do they find the relevance to them and what actually is, okay, what is the best route or what is the in the hierarchy of what I'm looking at? I think there's so much overwhelm and then there's decision fatigue. I mean, there's lots of different things that can just get us all wonky, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, and
So,
yeah, I get it's like, what do you do? Like,
yeah.
how do you get out of that box? I think, for me, there are a couple of things that help me most. I think one is, and this is counterintuitive. It is the advice we all get and don't follow, but it is the truth. It is to get some space to let your brain shut down.
Mm.
Like, it really is. It might be an hour, like, I will go walk the dogs. Sometimes my husband makes fun of me. I walk loops in my kitchen and dining room. I'll just, like, walk around the table in the kitchen island and walk and walk and walk, and he'll be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, Thinking." I just needed to, like, step out of the space I was in and think. Like, I just needed quiet for 10 minutes or 2 minutes or 2 hours or what have you. I think
Yeah. Get
space
out of the
really
car.
matters. Correct. Get out of the
If you're
car.
going to the grocery store and you're going in circles, get the hell out of the oops. Get
Right,
the hell out of the
go
car.
sit at the park for a minute and just be like,
Yeah,
"Okay, take a beat. Take a beat."
yeah.
I think the other one is, and I have clients do this all the time, is we go on the only kind of diet that works, which is a noise diet,
Mm,
where you sort of turn down the stuff
yeah,
that is inbound. Like, you unsubscribe, you just decide you don't have to listen to it. Like, and it's not forever, but you take 2 weeks and you just, like, tune out what you can, because we all have stuff we tune into that we don't need to tune into, and the people emailing you won't die in 2 weeks. Like, it's like an aloe plant. They're hardy. It's gonna be fine.
yes.
Um, and then I think the other thing is to ask for help, which
Mm,
is hard, but, like, I will give you a really good example of this today. I got coached this morning, and I did a webinar last week about selling, uncomplicated selling, which went very well. And
mhm,
I said to the coach today, who you know, um, like, I feel like I'm not doing a great job of this for myself. How
mm,
do I simplify this for me to make it more likely to happen? Like, how do I simplify this process myself? And in the next 3 sentences, I was like, oh, like, I'm gonna tell you, I couldn't see it.
yeah,
It was the exact suggestion I would have given someone else. But for me, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm making it too hard. I don't know what to do. It was ridiculous. I've been thinking about that for days. And, like, I said to her at the end of the call today, like, I could have had 10 minutes with you and then just hung up and been like, okay, bye.
oh,
But,
there you
like,
go. Simple coaching, right?
right. And
There's
I was just like, I just stared at her for a while and she's like, are you frozen? Are you okay? And I was like, dang, man.
Mhm,
Because, like, she was like, "Well, why don't you just do it like this?" And I was like,
mm,
Because that occurred to me for other people, but didn't occur to me for me."
yeah.
And so it is like having someone else's brain look at you and go like, "Dude, I love
Mhm.
you and I appreciate you and I see what you're capable of, but why do you have to do it like that?" Like, what are
When
you
you're in the
doing?
knot, when you're in like, I had a client one time years ago say to me, "When you're in the jar, you can't read the label." And that
Mm.
sounds a lot like what you're talking about.
Yes, and she
And
said
so
that today and I was like,
yeah,
"Oh my heavens."
yeah.
Like, well, just she could knocked me over with a feather. I was like, "Well, well, now
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do? Because it's really simple now." And she was like, "Well, now you have to do it. Duh."
That's a whole other podcast, but I
Correct.
love this idea of when you're feeling overwhelmed, when it does feel complicated, whether you're in your business, whether you're in your wherever you are, it's like take a pause because the simplicity, again, is probably not going to come in those moments when we're so overwhelmed.
Correct.
So take either energetically removing yourself or doing something else, which I love. I'm a huge proponent. I walk all the time, and that's
Yep.
where I find my footing and my grounding when I feel like the world is spinning around me. And I also like this idea. I really do want to come back to this, like when you're looking at it, and not everybody's probably a pattern person. Although I know you and I are both pattern people, probably from different perspectives, but
Mm.
looking at not everything is equal in the because we do like if everything's on fire, then nothing is well. I don't know.
Well,
I
right.
mean,
It is
you know what
that
I
like
mean.
if
I'm
everything
mixing the
is
metaphor
most
there.
important, if everything is most important, nothing is important,
Nothing
right? It's
is.
that like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And to me, again, this is going to take you all of this over, getting in the overwhelm, getting complicated, trying to force your way through it rather than getting support from a coach or somebody else, taking a break, doing some of these strategies that then create some breathing room where then you can come back into that space and go, oh, okay, where's the simplest way? That to me is where your charts come in.
well, and what I just wrote down while you were talking was like, I think then you pull out and you go, what problem am I actually trying to solve? Like I
Hmm.
used to work with tech developers in a former life, and I would go to them and say like, okay, I need this button to be green. And they'd go, what problem are you trying to solve? I'd be
Mhm.
like, well, I want the button to be green. And they'd be like, cool, no. What problem are you trying to solve? And I learned that like if I stop myself in the spinniness and go like,
Mhm.
wait, what am I actually trying to solve here? It's like, oh, well, hold on. I know how to solve a problem. I'm a pretty good problem solver, actually. Hang on. Let me access that part of my brain instead of the part of my brain that's like, ah.
Yes,
And
yes.
take a beat to be like, wait. I did it Friday. I was taking my kids to the zoo and I could not find the ticket in my email. Could not. Was like losing my mind because it was ticketed and there was no other way in that day. And I was like, oh my God. And I'm like having a stroke. And then at some point I was like, wait, what is the problem I'm trying to solve?
Mhm.
Because at that point I was like, did I imagine I bought this? Did I dream it? Did I like, oh my God?
Mhm.
And then I was like, well, if I'm trying to solve this problem and I did buy it, it would be on my credit card statement. So I
Mm.
go look at my credit card statement, and lo and behold, turns out I'm not even looking at the right thing because I'm looking for the third party that sold the ticket, not the, and I would never have found it. And of course, the minute I searched for the right thing, there it was. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
So I think that that creates again, then you're in a moment of enchantment because it all is, like, clicking, and you're just
there
like
it is. There's the flow. And you were like,
there's the
oh,
flow that
now I'm
we're
off
we've
flow to the zoo.
reestablished. So I think, gosh, of all the things, and I know we kind of meander I love that we kinda took a knot and then just pulled some threads during a conversation because why wouldn't we? The question though of like, what am I trying to solve? What's going on here that's because I even love the like, is this really? Because sometimes whatever we think the problem is too, sometimes we have to scratch a little bit even at whatever answer and go, is that really it? Or is there something underneath that till you kind of get really deep into, and again, maybe not with the aquarium tickets or whatever the tickets were, but the idea of other things sometimes in our lives, it's like if we are not aware of that, we're gonna run ourselves in that
Well,
we're
and
gonna
that's
chase
like,
that garden in a circle over and over and over again.
you said something about charts earlier. I like to change things into my brain into whiteboard charts. And I have one somewhere that is like, okay, what's the problem? You identify the problem, and then it's like, is this really a problem? And
Yeah.
it's like, yes, I can't move forward until I solve this. And
Mhm.
anything other than yes, I can't move forward until I solve this is no.
Exactly.
Because even if you're like, well, no, if you're like, maybe it's probably not a problem.
No.
Like that's a thing. It's just an interesting, like, in our brains are like, oh no, that's a problem. And you're like, is it? Or is it just unknown? Because our brains think unknown is problem,
This is a
but
good
that's
point.
not actually a problem. That's just that's just time hasn't caught up with us
And I
yet.
think what I also think, and what I'm hearing too as I'm listening to you, is when we get so invested in this energy of this, it really does take us away from like being in kind of, again, how we want to show up, who we want to be, what we want to accomplish in it. Like it just keeps us busy and distract. We become part of the noise that we're
Hmm.
getting like, inundated with. We are all then become like, we almost like meld into that energy rather than say, wait a second, and have that awareness. So I don't know, that resonates, but I think, again, these are all the ways to go down the path of disenchantment, frustration, and we've all
Yes.
been there. So it's not that it's not going to happen. Today feels like listening to you is like, how do we gently do a course correct in a way that feels good, that isn't too, I don't even want the solution to be
Well,
complicated.
and it's sort of like, it's like the road to disenchantment is paved with extra steps,
Yes.
problems that aren't real,
Yes.
and knots about things that aren't knots, right?
It's
Like
like a future
it's
chart.
that's so we can go that route. I mean, as
Yep.
I say to people all the time, that's certainly an option. I'll say to my kids, like, that's one choice you could make. And then it's like,
Absolutely.
but do you really want that? Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be way more fun to like do a bunch less steps and actually like what you're doing
Yeah.
and
Easier
like
to
love
do.
how you're doing it and let people love how you're doing? I mean, it just feels better not to bang my head on my desk if I don't have to.
I'm with you.
I'm
So if
just
we're
saying.
listening, if you're listening and you're banging your head, try one of these approaches, because I think
Yes.
that even one thing can help create that space. Because again, what's the point if we're going to be miserable? Or to your point, yeah, you can drive to Philly on a holiday. Oh, you can do that. However, it's like, I think that default to complicated and difficult, a lot of us have some of that wired into us. And what you and I are here to do is disrupt that. It's like, let it be more fun, let it be easier, and here's the way how. And it can be very practical and it can be very magical at the same time. So
Well, and
I
we
don't
get
know if
to,
I've pulled that
yes,
together or
agreed.
not.
And I think the only thing I'd add to it is we get to choose
Yeah.
that. I think
Mm,
complicated feels like the route we have to take.
yes.
And I think over time and not, overnight, this is not something you like grab tomorrow and you're like, oh, I'm done being overwhelmed forever. Like it is not that, friends. It is not. But it is like you choose again every day
Hmm.
to be like, you know what? I don't need this to be so hard. I'm going to strip that away.
Yeah.
And that's magic.
It is magic.
That's enchanting.
And when your to-do list has 3 things on it, which is what kind of I use as my own guidepost, it's like when it gets really like 8:18, then I go, "Oh, wait, something's going on here." I gotta
Right? It's
rebalance.
there's something else happening.
Yeah, it becomes information rather than just kind of sucking me down that tunnel into multiple tunnels, and then I'd come out the other side really cranky and not the best version of
Well, and you come out the other side and go like, "Where am I? Like, how did I
well,
get
that's
here? I kind of blacked out in the tunnel. Like this is this was a weird
oh.
trip."
Oh my goodness. Oh, this is so much fun. You're gonna have to come back on. We'll have to dig into another thread.
Yay.
And I can't wait to hear what the listeners like, what questions you have. If there's something you want to talk to Sara about, I always say jump on over to my Facebook community, which is called Everyday Enchantment, and we can chat away. However, I also want people, if like they're like they feel that lane and they want to work with you or they want to get connected with you, where do they find you, my beautiful friend?
In your Facebook group. But
Come on
also
over. It's a party. We're
in
having a good
right,
time.
I like all things, Stacey. This is such a treat. I'm so happy for this podcast. I'm so happy about it. I sorry,
Yeah.
words. You can find me, of course, on Facebook. Just like a human, my name is Sara Torpey. You can come join my Facebook group, which is called Teachers in Business, and I will add the grain of salt that you need to hear that yeah, you are a teacher. We all come with something to teach, and just because you don't have a teaching certification doesn't mean you don't count. So get your butt in there.
Yes.
Or LinkedIn. The other happy place I am is LinkedIn. And if you're looking for the goofball version of me that is also useful, she lives on TikTok.
Ooh, yes. I need to
She
get on
play
TikTok. I haven't done that yet, but you being on there is just reason enough for me to get out there
I,
and be more
it's really
present.
funny. Like it is like 65% useful and 35% me just like that makes me laugh.
That's the best part. Okay, and then I also want, if people want the practical, again, these charts that you create really do help, especially when your whole mind is just like you're in the jar, you can't see it, and you need the person on the outside to give you
Yep.
the obvious like mic drop thing. Where can they get your book? What is it called, and how can they get
Um,
their hands on it?
it is on Amazon. It is a workbook because, like, what teacher doesn't like a workbook? It's got questions and charts and pretty things. And it is called Just Keep Going. So if you search Just Keep Going on Amazon with my name, it will come right up. It is super fun. And it's funny. Like, I think that book was magic actually, because it just came out of
Yeah.
you and one other person going, you see all these charts, this is a book. And I was like, well, okay.
Yeah,
And
enchantment.
sort of
There's one idea, one focus, one route. Go right to the grocery store. Do not stop at Starbucks and get your coffee right now. Just keep going.
just keep going. Well, and every time I was like, well, but I don't know how to do this, I'd go, well, okay, I know how to do the next thing. And I
Mhm.
just did the next thing until, like,
Yeah,
hilariously, now there is a book in my office with my name on it.
I
And it's
love it.
gorgeous. And
That's
it's like,
amazing.
huh, that wasn't so complicated, huh?
I'm gonna
Dude,
post all the links for everybody that
awesome.
they can easily find you. So they even if you don't even if searching feels complicated, we're gonna make it super 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 right to the point to get to all of the again the amazingness in terms of simplifying, and in that simplification just creating so much magic in everyday life. Because again, if you're feeling overwhelmed, we want to give you the fast pass, the cutting out that route as soon as possible. Thank
Yes.
you so much for being here and being this amazing guest. And I am sure we will be chatting again in the
Well,
future
and
on this podcast.
thank you. This is such a treat, and you are my very favorite, and everyone should follow all the things you tell them to do because you're basically right all the time. So that's cool.
Woo!
It's all more magical with more Stacy. And I know
Okay.
that, and everybody else should.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure.
Always.
All right. Until next time, we will see you on the flip side. That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.